And so I was literally like building exit models while I was making dino nuggets for these kids in this nice house in La Jolla.
The college chats, everybody. Today I have Grace Zambriski, right? Zambriski? Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Yep. So, Grace, love the opportunity to get a little background on you. Who are you?
I am a current senior at SDSU. I'm a finance major. I'm from Torrance, and I'm currently looking to get into the venture capital and entrepreneurship space, same as Beck. And we're on the VCIC team together.
Ooh, did you just say same as me? You think I'm gonna get into venture capital?
Entrepreneurship space, at least,
Okay, maybe
which
that, yeah. But
requires
I'm
venture
not
capital at some
sure.
point in your journey.
Yeah, that's what Robert said too. But
Good
why
to know
did you
about.
decide to go on this journey for VC? What made you get up one morning and be like, I'm gonna be an investor?
I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. My dad's a financial advisor. And so he was just like, if you don't know what you want to do, go into business and then figure out which part of business you like. So I came
Hmm.
into SDSU as a business management major, and I went to a fairly like highly academic high school. It was a public school, but the culture was very cutthroat and a lot of people were like really driven academically. And so I felt like at SDSU with business management, I wasn't really being pushed that much, cruising through my classes freshman year. And then COVID happened, and then I had a lot of time to sit and think about it. And I was like, okay, I don't just want to go with the motions. And I was referred to one of the heads of the entrepreneurship program and finance program at SDSU. And they asked me, what skills do you have? And I was like, I said the basic same skills. Oh, I'm good at communicating. I'm a leader. I can do
An
Excel. I have,
absolutely amazing, great communicator.
yeah, everyone can do that. What makes you different? And so I was like, okay, that's valid. She was like, so you should switch to a more like technical major. And so that's when I switched to finance because I was like, at least if I don't end up doing finance, I'll know how to do my own finances and that'll be helpful at some point. And so then I started looking for more like finance jobs and I couldn't find any. No one wanted to hire, unfortunately, no one wanted to hire freshmen in college. And so I started nannying, actually.
Yeah.
I started being a nanny and which makes great money, by the way.
Ooh,
10 out of
the
10
come up
recommend
story.
being a nanny. People I nannied
Really?
for had a family VC fund. So it was just them two that had the VC fund. They were investing around 10 to 15 million for the sides of their funds. And they saw that I was a finance major and they were like, hey, like we have some Excel stuff. Do you want to look at it and help us out? And so I was literally like building exit models while I was making dino nuggets for these kids in this nice house in La Jolla. And then I was like, dang, that's what these people do. Like they sit around all day and look at pitch decks and make investments and they get this nice house in La Jolla and they can pay someone to make dino nuggets for their kids. That seems like legit. And so
You
that's when
might
I
have
decided I wanted to
summarized
do
that
venture capital.
quite a bit.
What?
Yeah. You might have summarized that just a little bit. They look
Yeah.
at pitch
I
decks
mean,
all day and all of a sudden House in La Jolla.
they actually came from like accounting and sales back.
I
Like
feel
he
like,
was a salesperson and she was accountant. And then they came together and were like, okay, we can do venture capital.
yeah, you did touch on this a little bit for in terms of your college experience. What was that like starting as a freshman? What did you specifically do in terms of like your involvement, in terms of what you thought about that? Just overall, what does that balance look?
I was like an overachiever in high school, like I said, very competitive environment. I was president of clubs, did so much volunteer, worked my butt off, and had so much anxiety over what college I was going to go to. And I got into every college I applied to, but I ended up going to the easiest one I applied to. And I remember freshman year, my roommate across the hall in the same honors college, in the same dorm as me, got a 1900 on the SAT. And I spent 2 years laboring over my score in the SAT, like, having multiple breakdowns over how I did. And I don't need to say my score, but I did
Yeah.
pretty well. And I was so upset that someone who didn't work nearly as hard as me got exactly to where I was. And then I realized, okay, it's not about that, it's about what you make of it. And so that's when I kinda shifted it from
Mm.
just, like, achieving in school to, like, making more connections. That's why I started to be, like, a little bit more social. I joined a sorority just to make friends, and that really helped me because a lot of the older people in the sorority had already been through, like, the interview process. They'd already had positions on campus, and they told about their experiences, and because I was so burnt out from all the orgs I was involved in high school, I didn't join anything else besides the sorority here. I mean, I was in the honors college, but that was a waste of time. It was more just like an academic thing. But the first thing I did was I started looking for like a small job that wasn't just like a restaurant or like a service industry job. I worked at the leasing office in the apartment building that I lived in, which is super easy. All I did was like answer phone calls, sell apartments, do basic emailing stuff, but it was an office job. So I feel like that helped me get a leg up because instead of like their resume saying like Starbucks or Chick-fil-A, it said like leasing assistant or like leasing intern, which means I had like experience using
Yeah.
CRM software and stuff like that. So I feel like the balance
You
was
did
there.
touch on, yeah, this new software I'm using is a little interesting because it has like weird like cutoff points. But anyways, you did touch on like the whole kind of difference between scores aspect of when you're applying to college. What do you think about how college applications are nowadays with the whole SATs and stuff being what determines your fate, basically? What do you think about test scores, standardized scores in general? And what do you think about like if you don't do well in test scores, what might happen? Are there ways for you to still be successful?
Yeah, I think test scores are actually the dumbest thing on the planet. I think I know so many people who are so much smarter than me that have scored lower on test scores than me. I don't want to like brag, but I'm a good test taker. Not because I know the material, but because I know how to like do deductive reasoning really well. Like normally I can look at a multiple choice question and at least get a
Mhm.
50% chance that I'm gonna get it right. Um, and that's because my parents paid for me to do a lot of SAT prep, and that's all they teach you. And so like for people who couldn't afford to get that, like, tutoring, basically, they're at a disadvantage, which is not fair at all with college applications. My brother, who is a freshman in college right now, didn't even have to take the SAT or ACT because of COVID, and they just got rid of it
Mm,
for the admissions. I think it's much better to look at someone who's well-rounded because then they can handle, like, higher workloads. Like, I would rather hire someone who got Bs in high school but was, like, in sports or involved in clubs than someone who is, like, an A+ student that just sits at home all day and, like, codes. That's not really what I want as a part of, like, my organization,
that's
so
an interesting
I
take.
I don't think that I value being well-rounded, so I don't judge someone based off their test scores, but I also think a part of it is, like, how hard like, sometimes if you aren't gonna like, my one of my best friends is not good at taking tests, but she will, like, just spend the time to actually do well, and I think that as long as you're doing your best, that's all someone can ask for, and if you don't do well on a test, like, who cares?
Yeah, that's an interesting like topic you touched on because the whole idea of being well-rounded versus specialized. I think this topic is brought up like in all fields of life, including business, including venture capital. It's like including entrepreneurship. It's like, do you invest in someone that has expertise in multiple different fields, or do you invest in someone that is like way miles deeper into one field only? And then think of like founders, right? People that are like weird, socially awkward kids that are like insane coders, programmers at like high school, went to college, dropped out because they realized college is like all this ease and well-rounded behavior, right? And then they just drop out, pursue whatever they're doing with coding, and then all of a sudden they come up with this company, get funded, go into like Y Combinator, and then boom, they're IPOing in 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, like when it comes to, like I've looked at so many different founding teams, and you always wanna have those people on your teams who are like that, who are, like, head down, just into the research, like, really know their material, but those people usually don't get far unless they partner with someone who is well-rounded, because they don't they're so dividers
Agree.
on that the they don't see anyone else's opinion except their research and what they're doing, which is great for technological development and for making the product refined. But as far as like being able to pivot and test your product and stuff like that, you need someone who has more experience. I really value someone and personally someone who has tried other things and then found what they liked and then continued with. I feel like a lot of people who just
Mhm.
decide, like, in high school, like, "I'm gonna go into this, blah, blah, blah." They get through college saying that they wanna be a doctor or whatever, and they realize, "I hate being a doctor. I don't wanna do this," but you never tried anything else. So I think, like, trying something else or trying other things and then figuring out what you like, and then just sticking to that one thing, like, for me, like, entrepreneurship and finance, like, I'm never gonna go out of that. That's what I want, so I'm gonna stay on that one track to do that. But as far as entrepreneurs like that, those stars that you're gonna invest in, you definitely wanna see they have the passion and the drive for that, and you wanna make sure they have the time to do that as well, so if they're just too involved in everything else, then you don't wanna invest in them too. So I feel like it's definitely a balance, but those people who are head down need to be partnering with people. are more well-rounded.
That's a great point. I totally agree. I think like it's like that perfect combination of like people that are like good with different topics and skills. And I think that those people are also the people that like do sales, the people that are like CEOs almost. And sometimes it varies because CTOs can become CEOs, but like the people that are like very passionate, they can speak and communicate and they're great at empathizing with other people. Whereas like CTOs and like original founders of companies that are like super tech savvy, technical, head down, working on some like the next greatest invention, curing cancer. You don't even know what they're doing at that point, but I totally agree with you there. I want to get into what you are doing in the venture space with having done, let's see, VC Lab, Interlock, and EvoNexus now. What was those kind of three different experiences like? What changed between them? What are you learning in each experience, and what are you doing now at EvoNexus?
Getting into venture capital as a person in college and as someone who doesn't have the Harvard or Stanford name to back their credibility, it's all about who you know. And I'm thankful enough that the same venture capital community is very tight knit and they all know each other. So I made sure that when I was starting, I started at the Longlys, which was the family I nannied for, and then eventually started working for. And they knew Kim Davis, who's a professor here at SDSU, and then
Mhm.
Neil Bloom came and spoke in her class, and he was talking about how he's starting his own fund. So then I reached out to him, and my idea was to work for both venture capital firms at the same time, but there is conflict with that because you can't do that. I didn't know that at first either. So I'm learning process. And each one was very different. So Longley was simple, regular. They raise a fund and then they use that fund to invest in seed and series A round companies. Interlock is a syndicate. So basically we have a bunch of different people that they don't even raise the money until they get the idea, which is
Mhm.
very different because it requires a lot more like hands-on. You don't just have the money on hand. So what they do is they get an idea and they send it to their list of advisors and they're like, hey, let's say it's a software company. And they send it
Mhm.
out to the list of people who are like 10 experts in software. And then they get on a diligence call. So they're not trying to do their own research. They're just relying on experts to do it. And then as an exchange for doing that diligence for them, they offer them part in the syndicate. And so then the people
Ooh.
that are actually experts in the field get to invest in it. And a lot of them end up being board members or joining the team because they are so invested in the idea. So it actually helps like the network effect in general and the grow because you're connecting people with advisors that are like, really helpful. VC Lab was an awesome experience. It was completely remote. It's an international company that's completely remote. So like my boss was based in the UK and the other two bosses were based in Silicon. And then we were helping funds start in India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Peru. Like we were helping funds. Basically, it's an accelerator for venture funds. So if you wanted to start a venture fund, you go to them and they teach you how
Mhm.
to do it for free, basically. It's literally a nonprofit, but they have premium versions that you can pay for where you get extra tutoring, stuff like helped build a network.
Mhm.
Amazing experience. Definitely, I felt very underqualified. Everyone was like Forbes 25 under 25, and that was a really cool experience. But I wanted to get out of all of that working with venture capital. I was like, this is awesome, but you can't really be the best venture capitalist unless you've started a business yourself or worked at that. And I don't have any genius ideas like that, but I am very adept to like help people with their ideas and help develop ideas. And so that's
Mhm.
why I wanted to join EvoNexus because they're an accelerator for startups, right? So then startups come to
Mhm.
them with an idea and then they help grow the startup the same way Zip Lab does at SDSU. So my goal is to be on every single side of the venture capital transaction. That way, one day,
Mhm.
it could be next year, it could be in 30 years when I start my own fund, I will have been on every seat of that table. So I can have the most experience to be able to make the best investing decisions.
And you know what's interesting, and touched on this point of having the experience of all sides and stakeholders of something to be able to truly develop those skills in it. I did the reverse direction to get an understanding of being an entrepreneur. I didn't work at a VC, but I joined the VCIC to understand the VC perspective. And then Robert just happened to be an amazing entrepreneur himself too. So it was like the perfect mix with page two. And it was just like I got to experience the venture capitalist POV first, understand term sheets and such, and then be able to move more so into seeing these decks, seeing how entrepreneurs think. And then now I've been more involved with like Zip and such. So it's like a very interesting point that you brought up. It's just like the complete reverse direction from mine.
Yeah.
But now that you touched on EvoNexus, like what are some of your goals with that? Like actionable goals until you maybe graduate? I know you're graduating this semester, right?
Yeah. For me, um, I wanted to join EvoNexus as a way to continue my involvement in the SDSU community and the San Diego community in
Mhm.
general. The reason I ended up at EvoNexus was because I was doing these VCIC competitions, and I didn't have a job the last semester. I was just working off my internship money from the summer, and I was getting low on funds, and I was like, "Crap, like, I love venture capital stuff so much. I wanna be involved in it somehow, even if it's just volunteering." Like, in that meeting we had, I talked about how I could just do pitch decks for people. Like, I just love doing pitch decks, like, something I would just do for free, honestly. And so I reached out to Kim Davis, the entrepreneurship professor at SDSU. She's a mentor of mine. And I was just like, "Hey, like, I don't know if there's an opening anywhere, but I would love to just come shadow someone. I would love to just be there. You want to pay me, I will just go and do it." And I guess that just put my name in her head. And when an opportunity came up for an internship at EvoNexus, I was the first person she thought of. So she recommended me for it. And they are looking to hire someone full time. It's more of a marketing position, which is not really what I want. I want to do finance. So I don't think I would be
Mhm.
willing to take that full time offer. I've already accepted a full time offer at LPL Financial
Oof,
to be a
congrats.
financial analyst. Thank you. And so my plan with that was to stay connected in the San Diego community, but then go to work for a big corporate firm and get real finance experience. That way, not only I have connection with entrepreneurs, but also with like real financial analysts. So I can get the
Mhm.
technical side of the finances as well. As companies get bigger, you need to be able to look at financial statements and really know what they're doing. Just furthering my experience. I don't think I'm ready at the moment to go into venture capital. I know it's what I wanna do, but
Mhm.
I know that from what most people have told me, being so young, it's really difficult to go and learn, get a lot of more experience, and then go and start.
And then now that you mentioned LPL, that's an interesting little journey you have planned. I'm super excited to see where that goes. I actually brought on Anthony. Do you know Anthony from LPL? It's like a
He walked me
full
through my
rotation
interview.
analyst. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, so I had him on. It's going to be an interesting kind of journey, the way you see it going for the finance, corporate finance side, and then being able to synergize that experience with like your entrepreneurial side. But what was like your recruitment process like for first those VC firms and now for LPL too? Was it any different? What was, like, your experience with that?
Yeah, I think for as far as the VC firms, most of it was just connections, like people I knew, people who could recommend me.
Scrappiness?
Very much just, like, building a LinkedIn presence, being someone that when they look you up, they're like, "Okay, you have 500 plus connections. Okay, you have connections that are international. Oh, you follow people who are in the finance world, like, you're getting finance news." I kept updated with Wall Street Journal, just, like, constantly being up to date with information, that way I could have intelligent conversations. I feel like a lot of older finance people don't expect young people to be able to hold an intelligent finance conversation. So I focused on building my rapport with that, but also I couldn't sell them on experience. There was no way I could be like, "I've been doing venture capital," or "I've been doing entrepreneurship for X amount of years." That was just not happening. So I had to sell them on the fact that I was willing to outwork people. And I just like, you see me as a nanny. Like I'm nannying in high school so I'm nannying in college just so I can make ends meet. I'm a hardworking person. Like I will learn this. And even if I said I didn't know something, I was willing to accept that I didn't know it and like go back and learn it. So that was basically what it was for the VCs. And as far as being an intern at a VC, they don't actually put that much responsibility on you. They ask you for your opinion and they give like opportunities to attend meetings and you do some exit analysis and stuff. But when it comes to like making a $5 million investment, they're not going to trust a 19 or 20-year-old like do the final document. So like I was the one creating the rough drafts, obviously, but it was still a good experience. As far as LPL, I applied very early in the process in the fall and I just went through their interviews. They had a case study that I had to do, and I definitely reached out to everyone around me. I did the case study myself, but then I also sent it to my dad and my uncle who were like, "Hey, you forgot this point," or "Hey, you should add this commentary," or "You should talk about the current environment," or whatever. I got advice from other people.
Mhm.
Never try and do anything by yourself. It's always best to leverage the people that can help you. And when it came to the interviews, I was very candid and honest with them. And I think they expected somebody who was just gonna sell them on the fact that they were, like, the best finance person, and I didn't try and do that. I told them what
Mhm.
I wanted to do was to go into venture capital. I told them my personality. I told them that I'm a hardworking person and that I have experience with financial advisors. My dad is one, so I knew that side of the business very well. And even one point in the interview, you know how sometimes during interviews, you just say what comes to your mind, you don't really think first and say Um,
Yes.
I was at an interview and it was like the super day. So there's 3 interviews in a row. So I was like interviewed out basically. And I go into this interview with this lady and one of the questions she asked me was, "How would your friends describe you?" And the first thing that came
Mhm.
out of my mouth was, "Sometimes my friends think I'm on drugs, but I'm not on drugs. I just talk a lot and I'm really active." In the LPL interview, I said that I was on drugs. And I'm not on drugs. I don't do drugs. But what happened was the first thing that came to my mind was my freshman year, one of my across the floor mates
Wow.
said that he thought I was on drugs when he first met me because I was just so talkative and so fast and so outgoing and so high speed. He thought I was on coke or something. And I told that to the lady in the interview and I walked out and I was like, "There's no way. Like, there's no way." I was like, "Grace, come on. Like, you literally just said you're on drugs in this interview. There's no way they're gonna hire you." Like, absolutely. So I was just like, "All right." And then I got the offer
But
and I was like, "No
they
way."
hired you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
know
I
what?
think they
But I
just
think
appreciated.
that's what differentiated you. Yeah.
Yeah, and they appreciated that I wasn't trying to be fake. What they were getting was what I was, and I was honest. And I think they appreciate that. 'Cause at this stage, they're not looking for someone that has all the knowledge because they can teach you all the finance stuff. They're not worried about that. They're gonna reteach me all the financial stuff. They're worried about someone who is fun to be around. I'm gonna be working in the office with these people, communicative, can be transparent, and someone who's not willing to admit when they're wrong. I think is a big one. A lot of
Mhm.
people, like, stick by it. They're like, "I don't wanna show that I'm imperfect, so I'm just gonna stick by this." And it's no, it's okay to pivot and admit when you're wrong. And I think that was one of the things that really helped through that interview process, but I would definitely not recommend saying that you're on drugs in an interview, just in general.
Yeah. Maybe do a different similar story that connotes the same exact type of value or whatever that you bring. That's a good point that you brought up. One thing that I've witnessed from my personal experience working with you at BCIC and other things in class as well is you're good at leveraging people to basically be able to get help for whatever help that you may need. Very apparent in BCIC. Brought up a guy who was on a call. You're like, by the way, do you know anybody in this field? Somehow brought in an expert in the field, and then we ended up winning the regional. So that was amazing. But you, for what type of kind of advice do you have for students that are trying to pursue finance, business, maybe venture capital that, outside of leveraging sort of people and connections, what other advice do you have for them?
I read the book. I know one of the most read books about that. But look, featured.
Oh my
Oh my
god.
God. Who am I
Greg
featuring? Oh
Bruce.
no.
He literally left the lab to get away from us.
Yes,
Okay,
literally,
awesome.
it was way too loud.
I read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and not everything in
That's
that
a
book
good
is,
book.
like, what I've learned, but in general, the biggest takeaway from that is people love to talk about themselves, and people will remember you and like you if you ask them questions where they're allowed to talk about themselves. So when you're going into
Mhm,
interactions where you want something out of someone, not in a selfish way, but like you want a connection or you want to be able to like have that person remember you, ask them about how they got to where they are today. You might actually learn something through that. And then they'll be really willing to help you because they're like, "Wow, this person really likes me. Like they care about me." And you don't have to do it in an insincere way. Like I genuinely do want to know how these people got to where they are. But using that
mhm,
strategy of letting the person talk about themselves and make them feel like a hero for helping you out really wants people will be more eager to help you and trying to just the little things in conversations that make people connect with you to remember you are huge. I'm fortunate because my dad's from New York, my mom's from South Carolina, and like I have family in almost so many different states around the US. So in every conversation, like my
mhm.
boss knows, like, "Oh yeah, I went to Michigan." And I'm like, "Oh, dude, like one of my best friends' dad went to Michigan, like he's on the admissions board, like blah 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 blah." Like little things like that. Or like he likes to scuba dive. "Oh, I went scuba diving that one time and blah 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 and this and that." And other conversations that had to be nothing related to even with school, like Robert, hockey. He loves hockey. He
Mhm,
remembers me because I like and I can get that connection with
mhm.
him and he sees me as someone who's a friend, not just as someone who's a work whatever, like a partner kind of thing. So, differentiating yourself from other people by being more personable and knowing how to work a room in conversation, not just like people who are well off and high up, they're used to being asked for favors. So if you lead a conversation with that, they're going to be turned off. But if you lead a conversation trying to get to know them first, they're much more willing to help you. And then also always thank people. Even if they did the most minimal thing, send a thank you note. Even if they didn't even help at all, send a thank you note. Because people a lot of times,
You met them for the first time?
yeah, just the judges at VCIC. Like we just said a thank you note to Bart, and now we're meeting with him
Yes.
tonight to get advice. So it's just like the little things, just keeping in
Yes.
contact. It's so easy. It does not take a lot of effort to just say thank you. Like any interview, always send a thank you note. Thank you for their time. Just,
Mm.
or even if just like they're just giving you random advice, even if you're not going to take the advice, just thank them for their time. Because you never know who that person's going to recommend you to in the future. Or even with professors as well. Like, even if you don't want to listen to anything the professor's saying, thank them, be polite to them, because who knows, one day their husband could be the boss of the company you want to work for, and they could ask, and then teacher would be like, "No, that guy was a dick in class. I don't want to hire." You just never know where your reputation is going to be said. So just try and keep it like, especially in the VC and entrepreneurship world, reputation is everything. So keep your reputation held very high.
Yeah, I should definitely start implementing sending thank you notes a little bit more often. I typically send via messaging, but I know you do some interesting stuff with like note, like what are those like gifts and cards? Is that what you sent with for VCIC to the person that helped us out?
I
Remembering
always
something.
send, if for example the expert calls that we did, to both those guys who gave us
Yes.
expert information on machine bio, just sent a picture of
Yes.
us winning so they could just see that. And
There you
also,
go.
yeah, and then the thank you note. So, especially in LinkedIn, like for example, it's gonna be hard for them to remember me like like in the future, right? But if I go to that same LinkedIn message, they can scroll up
Mhm.
and say, "Oh wow, this person won VCIC." Or they can go to your profile and see what you're doing. Just helping them remember you, helping them remember your last interaction. It's good to have some sort of written form of thank you.
All right, there you have it. Any last parting advice, Grace?
Do something you're passionate about, because when you're young, it's like the time to do it. You can always settle for like a boring job later in life.
There you go. With that being said, thanks for hopping on, Grace. Appreciate your kind of journey, your story. Definitely interesting takes on the personality and connecting side with professionals. Interesting take on your approach to VC, going from the on working with entrepreneurs, working from all different stakeholders, and then trying to get your way into VC, even the corporate side as well with LPL. And then great advice. I totally agree. Doing the little things definitely add up. Being able to have these like amazing relationships, amazing connections definitely helped me out in terms of my connections as well and where I am now. Again, thanks so much for hopping on and hope students can see this and also connect with you on LinkedIn, which I'll put your LinkedIn profile in the description.
Awesome. See you later, Beck.